For the first time in history, I'm not just saying good afternoon, Scott Baker. I'm also saying good afternoon, Sierra Holland, which is a different opening than we normally do. But Sierra, welcome. Scott, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
You know, when we look at these Lead Better focuses on the field note of the day, they're not usually a specific in a title to say the Tour de France. And it's as the ultimate display of teamwork. And I'm going to have to say at the beginning that, you know, those of us who really follow the Tour de France, you know, that have a deep insight in, say, Team Visma and their general manager, Richard. Actually, I know nothing about it. I happened to interview the guy a couple of months ago who's in charge of Team Visma. But that's where my knowledge of high-level cycling begins and ends.
Yes.
I don't know about you guys.
There's even some question as whether or not you know how to pronounce his last name.
Well, Plug. I mean, Richard. I remember. You know,
yes.
It was actually a fascinating interview. You can go back. You can watch it on YouTube. He was part of our community conference in the fall. But I think it's a fair point here about that the way these cycling teams operate. Great example of how teamwork could work and should work. Now, does that translate into how you do this in your organization? That's what we'll solve here in the next 14 minutes.
So as an analogy, though, Scott, you mentioned you have very little experience with the Tour de France. Sierra, fan of the bike racing at all?
I have to admit, I got a pretty big lesson in what I needed to know this morning through the field note. So I feel like we're all on the same page here, but the connections that you can make to how teams work, how leaders lead, and how individual team members can show up as more of an enterprise team member or an enterprise leader was an analogy I was starting to get from the field note today.
Yeah. Well, and the field note, I think, Mikey, makes a good case when it is saying that as you look at how the team members support kind of the dominant cyclist, you know, that is there and make their experience the thing that they're all circled around. And we don't realize all the things if you're just a casual fan or you haven't paid that much attention. You don't know what goes into that. But then the field note makes a shift because it's kind of, it just sort of happens. And I don't know if it felt too subtle to you or not, where it's not like we're normally in environments where we've got like 20 people on our team and we're like, well, we've got to make the one superstar look good. Because it's usually not us supporting one person as it is one purpose.
Right. And there is an adjustment even with the tour in the way that it's gone. It used to be that teams would be structured with one particular leader in mind. In the last 4 or 5 years, they've kind of turned into super teams, primarily because the tour has gotten more popular. There's a Drive to Survive kind of documentary on Netflix in the same way. There's a lot more sponsorship money that has come in. And so now there is like a real tier of like big teams and small teams, teams with $60 million budgets and teams with $17 million budgets. And when you have that, now you've got multiple superstars on the same team. So the opportunity for guys to be like, oh, it's my turn to step up because our designated team leader is suffering a little bit or he's not stepping up the way. That individual ego is probably more likely to kind of raise itself up. And there are examples in history of like when there's two superstars on one team that like famously back in 2006, Lance Armstrong attacked one of his teammates, Alberto Contador, in a time where everyone had known that it was Contador's year. And to attack somebody the way that Lance Armstrong did at the time was a real controversy because they were teammates. It was understood who was going to do what. Contador did end up winning the Tour that year, as was designed. But the fact that Armstrong would attack the way that he did became a controversy that people still talk about today. So,
Sierra, do you buy that Mikey actually remembered all of that off the top of his head, or do we think that he looked that up earlier today?
I believe that Mikey is the keeper of much knowledge, so I'm not the one to question it. But I think there are so many great connections to what leaders are facing with their teams related to this field note. Every leader wants to have a team stacked with very high-performing individuals. And two, the leader is then tasked with helping them make sense of their place versus other places in the team structure, who sometimes needs to be out front and lead because they have particular strengths. It made me think of strategic planning itself. Rather than just planning and carrying out a plan, it's actually bringing the team behind. We need to do this plan now, that plan later. This person needs to step into this role in this way, because they need to be able to frame that. What are we all here to achieve? If we want to meet that sales goal at the end of the year, if we want to bring this new customer into our client set, if we want to treat more patients than we've ever treated, we need these people in these positions in order to make that success. So I felt like I was pulling so many different pieces and connection points to the field note today, from strategic planning and thinking to even, how do you get your team to be an enterprise leader, or how do you get your team to think of the brand that you're supporting, the broader goals first and their individual goals second. So much of that comes down to how you frame those opportunities as the leader, and also how you're thinking about rewarding and recognizing them individually for the part that they played afterward. Because sometimes it's following up after some really exemplar performance. The team lead has to have enough willingness to give that credit to the other team members. And the leader has to then be able to step out and say, hey, maybe you weren't the star performer on stage today, or maybe you didn't, lead that pitch, but we know that because of your detail orientation, our pitch deck was the best it could be. So much of that comes down to different decisions in the moment.
Does it feel sneaky? Does it feel like, if I was a leader who had like a number one that we all kind of like, and it's not a goal, maybe it's a person, like in a lot of ways, like with the team, and there's a number two who's waiting in the wings, and so as a leader, I know that number one's getting all the credit, but number two did a lot of the work. And so I'm going to go privately talk to number two just to assure them your time's coming. Right. And you can see how that works in a Tour de France kind of way. But how do you say that to number two without feeling like you're undermining what number one? Because number one wants to be the starter for a few more years, right? Number two wants to know when to pull out the knife to, drive the ship, right? But if number one knows that you're talking to number two, it feels like, oh, they're already making plans. Like, how does a leader have these conversations without making it feel like it's sneaky? What do you do in that situation? How do you keep teams and also keep a number two from going to another team? What do you do?
My mind always goes to, it's finding those special moments and what matters to them most, because not everybody wants to be rewarded, recognized, or praised in the same way. There are some people who want it to happen in front of the team. There are some people who want it to happen privately. For others, they don't need to hear that they're doing a great job. They need to see that you're committed to their development. So I think it's about not letting them stagnate in whatever their role may be, not letting them feel like they are number two, but that you're equally pouring into each. And when the right time and the right opportunity comes, you're doing everything you can now in your power as their leader to develop them to step into that role. So that's how I'd take it. I think no one will be surprised that the leader is having individual development conversations with each team member, but definitely wouldn't want to come across as pitting them against one another. It's more about, how do we hone your skills so that when that opportunity is here, you're ready.
Right. Yeah. Okay, now there's jerseys that you win in the Tour, and whether or not you wore them on a certain day or a certain stage is like how well you performed overall up to that point and how well you performed in that stage as well. There's a polka dot jersey for the most points in mountain climbing. So sprinting is a different jersey. It's a green jersey, right? The overall time leader is the yellow jersey. So when we are, in our minds, Lance Armstrong always wears yellow. It's because he commonly had that jersey on his back. If he bailed out on one stage and got 3 seconds behind in overall time, he would lose the yellow jersey, and the next day would start, the yellow jersey would be on somebody else. So the Tour gives opportunities for leaders to hand out different jerseys. And there's mountain climbing specialists, right? There's sprinting specialists. And those sprinting specialists oftentimes will win a stage, but their team leader will still be the one who retains the yellow jersey for the overall time of the stage. Can you see how that might work on different teams? Is there a behavior there that we can like really pull out? And what's some ideas that we can pull out of different jerseys being available there for different team members?
My mind always goes to symbols because there are plenty of symbols. Do you have a specific office in when you're in the office? Do you have the corner office? Do you have the office that has the really nice chairs? Do you have better proximity, or do you have an executive assistant, or don't you? Because what you're talking about, those jerseys, they're all symbols of what's going well and what privileges that team member might have. I think it's highly relatable to any type of, organizational symbols that you can point to that denote whether somebody has achieved something, even rewards or recognition. If you have behind you in your office a specific trophy that you have on display, that's communicating something as well. It starts to open up that conversation. So my mind goes to symbols. Scott, do you have anything else that comes to mind for you?
Well, I think there's lots of ways that people are recognized that motivate and inspire. But I think still that the thing that I took out of the field note was that as it transitioned in its point, it wasn't so much about the individuals on the team supporting other people or how we elevate talent within the team, as it was how we all understand our role around the purpose of the team, that it was about a purpose, not a person, not particularly about talent. Now, we should have also pointed out, by the way, right at the beginning, that in our CRA Admired Leadership world, we have our leadership side and our strategic communication side, and Sierra, being a managing director in that side, is way smarter than Mikey and I on all of these things, as is evident. But when you look at that, I think that one of the things, and maybe Sierra, as you work inside organizations and you see how they're kind of trying to communicate, to me, I don't know where you can't always make a corollary to any kind of sport. Right? We've often made that point. Like, we don't have 6-month seasons. We don't watch game film in the same way. And so one of the things that Mikey and I talked about a couple of months ago after the NBA, or a couple of weeks ago after the NBA finals, was how the Oklahoma City Thunder had kind of destroyed the team on purpose to allow it to rebuild around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, their star. And they could do that. And we see this all the time. Like, we see it in many teams here where I am in Pittsburgh right now, where you don't have that luxury, I don't think, in the regular organizational world to say, you know what, we're going to not perform very well for the next 18 months. So we're going to have 6 quarterly reports that are going to be deficient. But that third year is going to be really great. It just doesn't work that way exactly in the real world. But then if you say we are going to stay focused around the purpose, the ideal, the thing that we're pointing to, then everybody can see where they play their part. And then the team performs like Team Visma.
That actually makes me think of, anytime that there's an organization going through change, there are typically one of 7 stories they might tell or call upon in order to make that change make sense. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. And the reason why we've existed for as long as we have and developed the way that we have is because we tell stories. So often leaders will display a collection of facts. They'll say we're transforming and our ERP system is going to go to this one, and we're going to start analyzing our data in this way, and our supply chain is going to change in this way. And it's a collection of facts, rather than saying, because of all of these external market factors, we need to respond and become a faster organization or something of that nature. We need to be able to tell that story that we can be consistent on over time. Choosing that story is really important. Are we telling a story of response, or are we actually telling a story of transformation? People like to throw the word transformation around, and it kind of bounces off of people. People don't know what it means anymore, but it really should mean transformation would be the story that you're telling of, we're going to throw everything out the door. Maybe we've been selling computers for all this time. Now we're going to start getting into the chip business. That is a transformation.
Right.
It's not a transformation if you're just, starting to use AI in certain pockets of your organization, but you're still doing that same core business work. So my mind goes to, when we're really trying to tear everything down and build back up, what's that core story that we can get everybody aligned around that speaks to the facts of the situation, that can also just give people a sense of, okay, the next 3 years, we might be going through several different changes and it's going to be challenging. My role is actually being redefined. I'm going to be on a new team in different ways. If there's a good story that they feel like they're part of, that changes the tone and tenor of how they perform.
Yeah, you're echoing what one of our commenters over on Substack said about defining what it means to win in the same way. And so it really is just about having that story lined out in the way that you're talking about. Like, if we're going to redefining what winning means from computers to chips now or whatever, that transformation, people think of it as change management, but the way that you're talking about seeing myself in a different role in the story, telling a different story. We used to play this game at camp called Win As Much As You Can, where we would fool kids into thinking that it was like an individual competition. The name of the game is Win As Much As You Can. And then at the end, we would reveal that the you was plural and you all failed, right?
Yeah.
But, just having that framework in mind, are we defining win correctly? Are we defining you correctly? And that transformation may have accidentally become entrenched in your culture that it's you singular. And now we need to turn it into a you plural, right?
Yeah. How do we work together to make that story, that vision that we have at the end of that change true?
Right.
Dynamite.
Well, I would call this successful. It's our first time doing this with 3 heads on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all. See you tomorrow,
All right.
Mikey.
We'll do this again sometime. Thanks, Sierra. Thank you, Scott. Bye now.